How's it going? Thad Brown here with you on a Thursday, back after a couple days off here for Labor Day. But you know what? All that vacation stuff, all that summertime stuff, all that time off stuff, that's all gone now. It is football season. We are in for the long haul. We are going to be here 2 times a week. I know it's busy, but we've also got BKL Nightly here on Rochester First, 5 days a week. We're all ramped up. It is time for football. It is time to get going for this Bills season. I got the Ravens colors behind me for Ravens Week, and we will get you ready for the Week 1 contest for the Bills here as we go along through this hour. Again, you're watching Rochester First. The kids, they all call it Rock 1. Now, a lot to get to today. I'm going to talk about the vibe over at One Bills Drive. Spent the day there yesterday, and I always liked it to just kind of get a gist of how the guys feel. You talk to these guys so often, you get a good feel. I think, being able to spend week after week with them, we'll talk about that. Obviously, the Trey White injury issue is probably point number 1 when we come to the Bills and what's in store for them on Sunday. We'll get to that. Matt Milano, what can he bring? A couple things I'm excited to see. And maybe later in the show, we'll talk about the Dave Portnoy factor and what he potentially might be able to do for Fox College football. But like I said, let's start here with the day in Orchard Park yesterday, with what kind of the vibe is with the Bills heading into the Ravens. And I got to say, one of the reasons I want to bring this up, like I said, is when you talk to this team every week, when you're in that locker room all the time and you get to know the guys a little bit and you get kind of to feel, the ebbs and flows of emotion. My reaction from being there on Wednesday yesterday is that this team is kind of up. Like they're ready for week 1. They're excited, as you might imagine, to be playing a game, to not be practicing anymore. No more fake games, no more can't hit the quarterback, no more protecting guys for the regular season. It is on, and they're ready to go, and they're excited. Specifically to me, I felt it with the defensive line, which is who I kind of primarily talked to yesterday, both, when it comes to having to face the Ravens' incredible offense and run game in particular. And just, there's a lot of new guys on the defensive line that the Bills are most likely going to run out there and play for week 1. There was just a fun level, like just an excitement, we're ready to go, and it's going to be a good time, something we're looking forward to, even though, you talk to, Sanders, Mr. TJ Sanders and Deion Walker here, and you realize that they have one heck of a task going forward, and game 1 for them is going to be in many ways kind of a baptism by fire. And despite that, and despite those guys being, pretty cognizant of what the chore is going to be, Deion Walker kind of joked. I asked him, what are the questions you're asking your teammates? He's like, is Derrick Henry really that strong? Is Lamar Jackson really that fast? So they understand that what's on the other sideline, what's on, across the line of scrimmage from them on Sunday night is going to be as good a test as there is in the NFL. And yet they've got a great attitude about it. They talked about how, the veterans have been telling them, reminding them to just kind of focus on this play, stay in the moment. I thought Greg Rousseau had a really good piece of advice for what to do when you're a rookie and it's game 1 for you. He says, look, it takes a conscious effort to make sure that you are doing the things you're supposed to do, to just breathe, to, remember to concentrate on this play. Don't worry about everything. Don't worry about the giantness of Sunday night and the Ravens and what the potential, seeding and implications could be. Just kind of group things into buckets, make your play, good or bad, kind of flush it and move on. And this is what the Bills' young guys are facing here in week number 1. But again, the talking to Deion Walker and TJ Sanders, I was impressed with how up they were, how much they were looking forward to this. And obviously for all these rookies, no matter what you might think of, there's a lot of pressure on Deion Walker. He's got to be a guy that, changes the run defense for the Bills. It's still game 1 in the NFL for these guys. I mean, this is a dream come true for anybody who's playing game 1, and especially for someone who's playing for the Bills or the Ravens, who get to open their NFL career in the spotlight, in the A1 game of the week, arguably, maybe not even arguably. So I don't think it should be a surprise that any of these guys are as smiley as they were on Wednesday. And of course, a part of this is everybody in the NFL is undefeated, so everybody feels good. And as a rookie, you're only excited about the good parts. It'll be a whole lot different Sunday night into Monday if the Bills get gashed for 250 yards on the ground and those guys don't play well. But regardless, it was notable to me how light and easy a Wednesday before a monster game like this was in Orchard Park. And despite all the things, all the implications, the things that might come with who wins and who loses this game, I thought it was a fun, I even felt good myself. I got done talking to these guys like, wow, that was fun. I enjoyed that. And maybe some of it is the reporter in me being happy about asking guys about real games and not, getting ready for some game that's 3 weeks off in the future. So it was just, again, not surprising, but notable how positive the Bills were in general on Wednesday. Now, on the negative side, obviously, is the injury situation at corner. We found out yesterday exactly what the situation is with Trey White in terms of what is hurt, and it is a groin injury for Trey White. Did not practice Wednesday. The Bills had a practice today inside, I'm assuming because of the rain. Trey White was not seen on the practice field for that. So no appearance Wednesday or Thursday means almost certainly Trey White is not going to be ready to go for Sunday. And separate of this game, just put that aside for a second, a groin injury is not one you generally get over quickly. And I don't know how much the prior Achilles and knee ligament issues for White figure into that, but certainly his age, 30 years old, probably doesn't help. So this may not be the last week the Bills have to go without Trey White at corner. And with Max Hairston already on injured reserve, that means we could see, some extended time with the other options for the Bills. The good news for the Bills is the other options aren't that bad. When you look at Dorian Strong and Jamarcus Ingram and what those guys can bring, Ingram has been with the Bills 4 years now. This is his fourth season. And yeah, he hasn't played a ton, but he has had 200 snaps in the defense. So it's not like he doesn't know anything. It's not like he's never played. This is a guy that has experience, knows the system, probably at this point has a pretty good idea where he's got to be, what he's got to do. So if he is the option for Sunday night, you've got someone with some experience. This isn't somebody you're just bringing off the street or a rookie who's never played before. And obviously Dorian Strong, 43 there, he is the rookie. But Strong is the guy that I think has people more excited about his potential. Even when he was drafted, even as a 6th-round draft pick, there was a thought that Dorian Strong was a guy that was going to outplay his draft slot, that there was ability there. He's 6'1", so he's certainly on the bigger side. He already was a good press corner. So he can be physical, he can get in your face, which is something Bills corners don't do a lot. It has not been their strong suit a lot. Kyer Elam was that, but he was so bad at everything else, it didn't really work. Strong is a guy that I think even though he leans a little more physical, a little more of a press guy, he functions in the defense a little better. And this would not be the first time the Bills drafted a corner in round 1 and found a better option deeper in the draft. That's what happened with the Elam Christian Benford draft, which I think most of you out there know. So there's a lot of excitement with Strong and a lot of optimism with Strong, and I think it's very warranted. He was a guy that I liked a lot coming out of the draft process. In camp with Strong, he wasn't very notable the first 2 or 3 weeks, but then the more camp went on, the later you got into preseason, you started to see some of the signs, some of the plays occasionally. And to be honest, it wasn't too dissimilar a timeline for what Christian Benford's first year in Buffalo was. He was very not noticeable his first 2 or 3 weeks. Then middle of camp, you started to note him making plays, being more involved in the defense, and Strong has kind of followed a similar path. So my gut is right now that I think you'll see a little of both guys. I don't think, even if they like Strong, I don't think they'll put it on the rookie to play all 60 minutes. Now, if they give him the first couple drives and he's great, I wouldn't be stunned if they keep going back to him. But I would think the plan, assuming Trey White's not going to play, which feels pretty safe right now, is it's going to be a healthy rotation of Strong and Ingram. And certainly either guy, if they're running out there and making play after play after play, have a chance to stick. But I think you'll see both guys going into this game. Now, again, with Strong, the upside is big. because of the fact he's a rookie. I mean, Jamarcus Ingram, yeah, he's had experience in the defense, but this is his 4th year with the Bills. If the Bills felt like he was going to be a regular every down, every game, every week, corner, even corner 2, they wouldn't have spent 2 draft picks on other guys. So I think the Bills have a good idea of what Jamarcus Ingram can be. And Ingram, by the way, had a pretty good camp himself. If you take away Trey White and Benford, of the other corners on the team, I thought Ingram had the best camp of anybody. So Ingram is not a terrible option, if that's who the Bills want to go to. But with Strong, again, there's a feeling that there could be more there than just a reserve corner. And that feeling for me was only amplified when Bobby Babich talked to the media today and got a question about what he's seen different about Strong from the beginning of camp until now.
The improvement over the last 2 weeks has been unbelievable. It really has. Credit to Jamal and Joe. It's funny. It's a confidence thing, right? You first get in the league, and you're trying to fit in. You're trying to see how you fit in. You're trying to learn new scheme. You're trying to learn all these things, and studious kid. I shouldn't say kid, young man, and not only is he talented, but the amount he's pouring into his craft is really cool to see.
So that's high praise for a rookie who hasn't done anything in the NFL yet, who hasn't even been spectacular in camp. Like I said, it wasn't like Dorian Strong rolled out the first day, July 24th, and is making interceptions, breaking up passes left and right, and just dominating practices. Now it's kind of funny that Babbitt says he's improved a lot in the last couple of weeks when the Bills really haven't had, much of a game. He played like a quarter in the preseason game. Obviously, there's practices going on, and improvement can happen. But, you wouldn't think that the very end of preseason is when you would not only notice, but feel good about the reps you're seeing getting better. Because the Bills had, more downtime last week at the end of preseason also. Separate of that, there clearly is a feeling from the Bills that Dorian Strong can do some things, and that what they've seen from him in the preseason is very encouraging. So, again, I still think it's going to be a rotation when we get out in the field Sunday night. But I would not be surprised if Dorian Strong gets the first look, and if Dorian Strong gets more looks, if that's who the Bills have to go to. Bottom line, look, is it okay or even ideal that the choice at the second corner is Dorian Strong or Jamarcus Ingram against the Ravens? No. I mean, at least it's not the Bengals and their aerial circus. As much as Baltimore can throw the ball really, really effectively, they're not out there running elite top-tier receivers. It's not like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith or T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Regardless, this is not what the Bills wanted to walk into week 1 with at corner. That said, if you're going to look at the different options that are out there when it comes to the 4th and 5th corner, like if we're going to judge every team's 4th and 5th corner, I think the Bills are going to rank in the top 10 somewhere. I feel pretty good about both these options. And that doesn't even discuss Dane Jackson, who is still on this team, even though he's only on the practice squad. He could easily be a practice squad call-up for Sunday night. And if you get nothing good out of Strong or Ingram, you can still go to Dane Jackson, to where, the ceiling might not be very high, but you're going to get a floor that's pretty respectable. So it's not good. Look, it ain't great, and it's going to be a problem. And when you hear people analyze this game, including me, we're all going to say, hey, that's a weakness, at number 2 corner. That said, I feel pretty decent about what the Bills are going to be able to roll out there for that game. Now, another thing Bobby Babich talked about today was how this game is going to go, what to prepare for. And it's a fascinating game in that outside of Bills' defensive line, most of the personnel on both sides are pretty similar. And the Ravens changed out one offensive lineman. Jair Alexander is probably going to be a corner for them. The Bills obviously have Josh Palmer. There's going to be a different corner. We just talked about it. Probably a different safety, with Cole Bishop playing with Taylor Rapp. But largely these two teams, especially at the top, are going to be unchanged. And one of the things that Babich talked about, and this is true for most games, but I think it especially goes when the talent on both sides is pretty similar, it's going to be about adjustments and how the Bills and how the Ravens react to what each side has had the last 4 months to prepare for this, week 1 game. And one of the reasons I want to bring this up is the Babich adjustments in the game against the Ravens in the playoffs left a lot to be desired, especially in the run game. First 4 Ravens runs last year in the playoffs went for 1, -2, and 1 yard. Early on in that game, first couple drives, it looked like the Bills were going to be a big pain in the neck for Baltimore's run game and may have figured something out for causing them a problem. And they probably did. And then the Ravens looked at it and said, well, let's do this. Let's adjust. And after that, the Ravens dominated on the ground. 19 of the next 23 rushes were successful runs for Baltimore. So in other words, there's a way that, how do I want to say this? There's a stat now called successful plays. And essentially it's simple. If you gain 50% of the yards you need to gain on first down, that's a successful play. I'm sorry, it's 40%. 40% on first down, 60% on second down, and then you have to get the first down on third down. So what it does is it takes running plays, or any play really. But if you have 3rd and 2 and you only get 2, well, that's what you needed. So that's a success. But if you have 1st and 10 and you get 2, that's not a success. So it allows for the number of yards gained to be judged not simply on 6 is better than 2, but based on a little more of the situation. Like I said, the Ravens, after those first 4 carries, had a successful run on 19 of 23 carries. They had 11 runs that were at least 10 yards. They had only, I think it was 7 runs that were less than 5 yards. But again, of those runs, there were a couple that were just quarterback sneaks, or what they did in that game in Baltimore was Mark Andrews tight end sneaks. There was another run in there that was a carry for -4 because Lamar Jackson bobbled a snap. Essentially, the Ravens on the ground did whatever they wanted to after those first 2 drives. And the Bills, you saw it, had to basically live off the 2 or 3 turnovers, the 3 turnovers they got in that game. Being able to adjust might very well be what determines, who wins or loses this game. And that's true for a lot of games, but especially this one where the talent levels are going to be near the same. The familiarity with both teams should be pretty high because not only was this the last game that the Ravens played and the second last game that the Bills played, but they also saw each other early in the season last year as well. And for the most part, all the personnel is the same. So which coordinator does a better job throughout this game is probably going to be one of the top 2 or 3 reasons why one team or another wins. And Bobby Babich last year did a poor job because whatever the Ravens did after adjusting in those first 4 plays, the Bills had no answer for it. And that's going to have to change for this game because obviously the Ravens are going to go right back to that run game. And with the Bills having all these rookies up front, all these new guys up front, trying to exploit whatever they possibly can there. And I'm sure, the Ravens are going to have some sort of plan that will have a level of success to it. They're too smart and too good not to be able to figure something out. Being able to adjust and make plays in game, I think is going to be one of the biggest parts of this for sure. All right, let's move on here. One of the things that can help when it comes to stopping the run game is Matt Milano. I mean, Matt Milano is healthy in this game for the first time in 3 years, in this matchup, I should say. He's had a year early last year where he was 2 years ago, I should say. He started the season, 3-4 games, got hurt in London. And then after that, it's been almost 2 full years of either Milano being out or Milano rehabbing. This year in preseason, it kind of felt like we saw the old Milano again. Sideline to sideline coverage, athleticism, making tackles in space, just being that able to cover the width of the field kind of player that we saw when he was a lot younger and healthier. And, this is a guy that's been a thorn in the side when it's come to Baltimore trying to do what they want with Lamar Jackson and, the quarterback key part of the run game. Because Milano's so athletic, he can kind of play the run up the middle, which, when Lamar Jackson keeps is often a fake, and still be able to get to the outside and make a play. So how much Milano's return has an impact is one of the things I'm very fascinated to see in this game. Can he be a difference maker? Can he be the guy that the Bills have wanted and have expected out of him, for most of his career? And the other part of this too is he has not gotten many chances to play with Terrell Bernard, not fully healthy. He had the 2 or 3 games at the start of 2023 when Bernard was really still kind of getting his feet wet and figuring things out in the NFL. But now Bernard is a seasoned, confident, he's a captain of the team. He knows what he's doing. So with Milano fully healthy, we think, and Bernard comfortable, experienced, not a rookie, not a new starter anymore, what can these two guys be together? Because Bernard, when he was drafted, felt like Milano 2.0. And I've always been fascinated to see if you get Bernard playing at a Milano level, and he's not there. He's not been at an all-pro level yet. He's been good, but not that good. But if you get him close to that, and you get Milano back healthy, playing at that, all-pro level he's been at before or something close to it, what kind of linebacking combo do the Bills have? We don't know. I mean, it might be really, really good. I mean, think about it. Would you like to have 2 Matt Milanos on your team? Absolutely you would. So what this linebacking core looks like with Milano back and healthy is one of the big fascinations for me in this game. And it's not just this game, too. It's going to be, all season long, certainly the first half of it, because we've never seen it before. There are very few teams in the NFL that can roll out 2 linebackers this athletic, because the game has been adjusting over the last few years from the old school, I'm a 250-pound thumper, I'm going to take on a guard, shed, and make a tackle for 2 yards right there in the B or A gap. Now linebackers are about, I got to cover spread, I've got an RPO, so I've got to defend this run off tackle and then get out to cover the hook pattern behind me, or some receiver running a little slant behind me. And then if I'm not doing that, I've got to go outside and, cover a zone run to the outside, while I'm also watching out for the quarterback keeping going the other way. Playing linebacker is entirely different in the NFL now than it was even 5 years ago, certainly 10. So finding these type of players, these athletic guys who can still stop the run, who can still be a factor between the tackles, but more importantly, that their bigger job is coverage and getting width, getting horizontal. The Bills have 2 guys we think can theoretically do this. There are not many teams that can say that. So what kind of an advantage does that provide? And especially in this game where the Ravens want to get wide with their quarterback runs, where a lot of what they succeeded with in that blowout in Baltimore last year in the regular season was short, quick stuff to the outside. Receiver screens, running back screens, just quick throws to the outside. The Ravens didn't do a ton in that first game, at least, or in the second game. No, in the first game of going down the field. They didn't have to. They just had the Bills' reserve linebackers' heads spinning the whole evening and turned that into a 3-touchdown blowout. That's not going to happen with Matt Milano, and certainly not with Milano and Bernard together. And that won't just be this game with the Ravens. That's going to be all year long for me about what they can be. But this particular matchup, I think, is the one that can really, present a ton of changes in terms of what the Bills defense can do. And with the issues the Bills have behind Milano and Bernard in the secondary, not only with the injury at one corner, but with Cole Bishop being a brand new starter, and certainly some uncertainty about what Bishop can provide. If you get Milano and Bernard playing elite level linebacker, it'll go a long way towards helping out what's going on behind. The D-line, I think, has got a better role in that, a more likely impactful role there. But Milano being better would help. And regardless, separate of how good the Bills are they going to win this game? I just want to see Milano and Bernard next to each other and what that looks like for more than 3 seconds. As someone who, watches film every week, goes over the game, covers this team all the time, that sounds pretty cool to me. So I want to see it for more than just a few games. Hopefully Milano's able to stay healthy and making that happen. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Gabe Davis is on the Bills. What the heck does that mean? What are the Bills thinking? Is that going to even do anything? We'll talk about that. Plus, Hard Knocks is done. What'd you all think? Did you like it? Some controversial thoughts. At least polarizing, I think, is the better word. Thoughts about whether that was a good Hard Knocks or a bad Hard Knocks. Well, bad Hard Knocks. We'll talk about that after the break. You are watching The Endgame here on Rochester First. The kids, all of them, when they text each other about it, they call it Rock One. We're back after this. Back here in the Endgame, Thad Brown with you on a Thursday, September the 4th. Didn't like the purple and white light combo, so I wanted to go Eagles and Cowboys to celebrate the first football game of the year. And somehow I think I found a worse light combo behind me, but we're going with it. We're going to ride it out for at least one segment. Y'all can handle it. It's just background lights. It's not a big deal. Bills just released their injury report for today. Let me get that to you. My phone's having trouble loading up here. Now, like I said, Trey White was not available, or at least not on the field during the portion of practice that media saw today. Let's see. Tyler Bass, by the way, right off the bat here, he went from a limited with a hip and groin injury to a full did not practice today. Get to that in a minute. Elijah Moore was not at practice for personal reasons. No worry there. Other than that, no changes to the negative. Tre'Davious White, again, did not practice at all. Christian Benford went from limited with a groin injury to a full practice. Didn't talk about that in the first segment. He's got an injury too, but he practiced. He was actually on the field yesterday, seemed fine, talked to him for a brief moment. Didn't appear to be an issue, and obviously going from a limited to a full practice is a very good sign for Christian Benford. But let's talk about the other two guys other than Trey White. We did a lot of that already. First, Tyler Bass. Well, it did not practice. That is obviously a concern. He did kick in the last preseason game a couple weeks ago against Tampa. Made his first 5 kicks, missed the last one from 26 yards. Did not seem to be any issues or any, at least, concern he would not be able to play. But, you know, the one thing I'd say all the time about when it comes to coaches and what they have to say, or when they're describing the likelihood of a player playing, don't believe what a team says, believe what they do. And what the Bills did today is they went out and signed a kicker. Matt Prater, who is 41 years old, just turned 41 last month. This will be his 19th NFL season. Incredible that anybody, I don't care what position, stays in this league that long. The good news for the Bills is, even at age 41, my man can still hammer it. Last year, he only played 4 games because of a meniscus injury. Got hurt. Arizona cut him, found somebody better. Arizona put him on injured reserve. They found somebody better and then let him go. 2 years ago in 2023, Matt Prater made his most field goals from 50 yards or longer, 9. Attempted his most in his career, 12. So at 39 years old, Matt Prater attempted and made the most 50-yard field goals or more in his career 2 seasons ago. He made a 62-yarder in 2023, which is the second longest of his career. Remember, Matt Prater, not too long ago, had the record for the longest field goal all time in NFL history with a 64-yarder. He was the guy that broke the Tom Dempsey record that stood forever. Got tied once, but stood forever. So when you think about kicking options the Bills can locate 4 days before the season opener, 3 days before the season opener, Matt Prater's a pretty good one. And to be honest, I'm kind of a little surprised he wasn't already on a roster when you start looking at what he has done even late in his career. This is a guy that can still bring it. His accuracy numbers were not terrible. 86% on field goals last year, which is, it's not great. You're not going to the Pro Bowl for that, but it's fine. So the fact the Bills brought him in, now Prater's only on the practice squad. So, you know, there's no need to sound the alarm bells for Tyler Bass just yet, but Bass going from limited to DNP on the practice report at the same time the Bills bring a kicker in, that certainly is something that screams that he might not be able to go. And we've had the Tyler Bass conversation before, but we'll do it again right now because, you know, clearly this is a newsworthy item. Tyler Bass has an upside that is really, really high. You saw it last year. He made a 61-yard game winner to beat the Dolphins. And he can regularly hit from 50, 55 plus. The strength of the leg is not in doubt. But the consistency certainly is. And that's where the concern lies with Tyler Bass. You might get the 55-yarder, but as he showed against the Bucks in the preseason finale, you can't really count on the 26-yarder. But even for the people who wanted to move on, and I was one of them last year, who thought it was time for the Bills to find something different at kicker, there just aren't enough options out there. And if you don't believe me, watch college football for 5 seconds any Saturday. Nobody can kick. It's not like receiver or defensive back where every team has 13 of them. Teams in the SEC got like 4 who are going to play on Sundays. There just is not that plentiful a supply of reliable kickers. So the reason the Bills still have Tyler Bass on the roster isn't because Tyler Bass is one of the best kickers in the league or someone you can always count on. There's just not other good options. So to be in a spot where potentially the Bills need somebody else to kick on Sunday night and to have the theoretically best 32 options already off the table and to still find Matt Prater lying around, that works out pretty good. And I'd have to review Tyler Bass's contract to say this with confidence, but Matt Prater is a guy who could threaten Tyler Bass's job in this team. Could. Probably won't, but could. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for now, for this Sunday, having Matt Prater on the practice squad just in case is a really nice add for the Bills at this time of the preseason. We'll see if it matters. Again, there'll be another practice report tomorrow. Sean McDermott in the morning will talk about who's going to play, who's not going to play. It is weird that Tyler Bass was injured for most of camp, came back and kicked in a game like it was normal, but now he's degrading or decreasing in his health, the week before the game. Certainly something to monitor. But again, I think Prater is a very nice add for this late in the preseason. Keon Coleman is the other concern. Now, he is listed as limited. He was on the field during practice today. Seems okay. Also has a groin injury, by the way. With Keon Coleman, from my point of view, the fact he's limited 2 days in a row, I'm not really worried about that. I think he's going to play. The fact it's a groin injury, something when you talk about injuries that tend to stay with a football player through the year, groin, high ankle sprain, hamstring, turf toe, that's kind of the group of things that you have a tough time shaking. You can be limited with like a quad bruise or a low ankle sprain. Those things you can get over a little bit faster. The groin is in the category of okay, let's be careful with this. Regardless, I think Keon Coleman would be good to go for Sunday. Now, if for some reason he's not, and again, I don't expect that, the Bills do have a new option at receiver. Gabe Davis is back, everybody. I don't know why the Bills felt like they needed him, but we'll talk about that now. He's on the practice squad. And, first of all, the Bills had to go through some roster games to get him there because you can only have 6 players on your practice squad who have 4 years or more NFL experience. And the Bills were at that 6-player limit. So to get Gabe Davis on the practice squad, they actually had to briefly cut Jordan Poyer yesterday. Didn't have to be Poyer. It had to be one of the vets. So you cut Jordan Poyer, you sign Gabe Davis, then you move Gabe Davis over to injured reserve or practice squad injured reserve. I didn't see what exactly the move was. Either way, he's on the injured list. And then the Bills brought Poyer back to the practice squad. So what is the purpose of Gabe Davis on this team? I think it's a big question because Gabe Davis doesn't have a role that you would think would be easily replaceable on this active roster. So, in other words, if Gabe's going to play, who's going to play over? You don't just put him on the team as a 7th receiver. Well, he's not going to play over Josh Palmer. He's not going to play over Khalil Shakir. He's not going to play over Keon Coleman. So those 3 guys are just off the table unless Keon Coleman has some sort of disastrous start to the season. After that, now, could Gabe Davis replace Tyrell Shavers on the roster? Sure. They're both bigger-bodied, more outside-type receivers. But the problem is that Tyrell Shavers is probably going to play a big chunk of special teams this year. Usually that receiver position does. Well, Gabe Davis has never been a special teamer in his career. Very, very rarely. Even as a rookie for the Bills, he didn't play much special teams. So if you're going to take Shavers off the active roster and replace him with Gabe Davis, well, now you got to find somebody else to do whatever Shavers' special teams responsibilities are. So if it's not Shavers, who else could it be? Well, could it be Elijah Moore or Curtis Samuel? Maybe. But those guys are a little more speed-based, slot type, gadget options in a role that Gabe Davis hasn't really played much. Now, Gabe Davis can play out of the slot. He's just fine as a receiver operating there. But he's not a quick, jittery, I'm going to take the, jet sweep around for 15 yards type player that both Moore and Samuel can be. So when you look at this roster and what Gabe Davis could or would do, there's really not an easy switch for him taking somebody else's job. If you put Gabe Davis on the active roster, you're going to have to reconfigure a number of responsibilities for the team. Doesn't mean Gabe Davis doesn't belong on this team. He's only 26 years old. So this is not a guy who's over the hill or, on the back end of his career. If he's on the back end, it's like the very tippy top of the back end. And right this second, if you were just going to say, I want a guy who can play receiver for tomorrow, would you want Gabe Davis or Terrell Shavers? I think there's a good argument for Gabe Davis. But again, with Shavers and that role, it's about more than just playing receiver. So I'm not exactly sure what Gabe Davis is going to do for this team. Now, can he, operate in the same way that Jordan Phillips and Jordan Poyer do, where he's a wise old head on the sidelines that can, talk to Shavers about, things that he's seeing and help out there? Sure. But, the wild thing is that, Shavers and Keon are the only really young guys on the team. It's not like Elijah Moore or Curtis Samuel need, someone else there. I guess at safety, you don't have more than one or two guys who are younger either. But I just don't really see the Gabe Davis benefit other than, having a reserve, legitimate, put him right onto the field and not worry about, is he ready to play in an NFL game type option on the practice squad, which is fine. But again, like we said, the Bills already have 6 veterans on the practice squad. So if you're going to bring Gabe Davis in, you got to cut somebody else. And not just anybody in the practice squad. You only have that group of 6 veterans. Now there's, linemen like Kendrick Green, who, you would think would be more replaceable than a Gabe Davis. If you're just, football player versus football player, Gabe Davis is probably more valuable to you than Kendrick Green is. So, that could be one of the options for the Bills. But regardless, when it comes to actually playing in a game, I just don't see where Davis fits to the point where he's going to be, that much of a help. Unless, again, now look, if somebody gets hurt, obviously Gabe Davis is a great option to have on the practice squad. But short of that, you'll need something to not be going right among the receivers. That's really, to me, the best path I see for Gabe Davis getting onto this team. That something has to be going wrong. Something that you plan for preseason. Keon Coleman taking a jump, Tyrell Shavers earning his spot. Something in that group has to be going so wrong that you got to find something else to turn to. And the other part of this, too, is I was surprised that Gabe Davis took this job. Now, I know, clearly he's still injured. He, suffered a torn meniscus late last year. And I don't know how it takes this long to heal from a torn meniscus. Not a doctor. Don't even pretend to be one as much as I can on social media. But that generally is not an injury that takes you 9 to 12 months to get over. Separate of that, the injury certainly was probably a factor when it came to Gabe Davis signing somewhere. But I'm a little surprised that he decided to take this job in, on a team where it doesn't seem like there's a clear path to him being on the field quickly, as opposed to waiting for somewhere else. I mean, I thought the Raiders could have used the receiver like Gabe Davis tomorrow. The Steelers probably could have used the receiver like Gabe Davis tomorrow. I know the Panthers just got rid of Adam Thielen, but that's another team where you feel like a competent play right this second receiver could have an impact. So we were talking about this yesterday in the media room. If there's 32 teams in the NFL and they all have 5 receivers, at least, some have more, the Bills have 6, that means there's at least 160 receivers in the NFL. Are you telling me Gabe Davis is not one of the 160 best wide receivers in the world? That there's 160 guys out there who do this job better than Gabe Davis. I'm not telling you Gabe Davis is some all-pro, that he should be a starter on 15 teams and he's totally being used the wrong way, that offensive coordinators have totally overlooked him, they've missed the talent. I'm not saying that at all. But if you think about, there's 160 guys playing his position in the NFL, they are not all better than Gabe Davis. So why he elected to take a job where when he's healthy, he's going to be at best 7th on the depth chart in Buffalo. And obviously the in Buffalo part you get, but 7th on the depth chart, that surprised me. Because no matter what you think of him, how effective you think he's going to be, the guy can play in the NFL. He's proved that over and over and over. Maybe not at a high level relative to the NFL, but the man can play. So I was surprised that this was the job that he elected taking. but good for the Bills. And we've talked about it before. This organization, this workplace, when you look at it as a workplace, people want to be there. And whether it's Jordan Poyer or Jordan Phillips or Gabe Davis, these guys want to come back and be a part of this because they enjoy it. This is their living. This is, you and I get up and we work, and you work more 9 to 5 than I do probably. I work weird hours. Regardless, we come in, we punch the clock. This is where we spend a giant chunk of our lifetime. And these guys have made it clear they enjoy doing it in Buffalo. Even to the point where Gabe Davis, it seems, is willing to take a practice squad spot as opposed to going somewhere else and potentially having a better chance to get immediate playing time. One more thing I want to talk about here before we take a break. Something that maybe only I am excited to see for Sunday is the debut of Bills blocking extraordinary tight end Jackson Hawes. I can't wait to see what he can do on a football field, in part because what we've seen in the preseason has been super tantalizing. The guy came in, billed as the number 1 blocker in the draft, and he has looked every bit of it in very limited preseason snaps. So not only is it about, what can he do? How good is he? But how much do the Bills even use him? Do they want to put a blocking priority tight end on the field a lot? Do they think he can be effective in that role, or how effective he can be in that role? Because the primary way teams use tight ends right now, or the way they want to use tight ends, is to make them a dual threat. Usually you put your tight end in the field, and a tight end means heavier, more likely to run type personnel. But my tight end is so athletic that he's still a threat to pass. So the hope is you put more tight ends on the field, defenses answer with more linebackers, but your tight end is so athletic, they can beat that linebacker in coverage somewhere. That's the general way teams use tight ends. That was the Dalton Kincaid plan. Remember? We're going to use him as, it's going to be 12 personnel, but it's going to be kind of like 11 and a half personnel. Well, the problem with Dalton Kincaid is that he's such a bad blocker. No one takes the run seriously when he's on the field. Jackson Hawes would be the other way. Everybody's going to know that he's a great blocker. The question with Hawes is, can he be a threat enough as a receiver to force defenses to be honest against him? That when he's on the field, you can't just go heavy personnel and treat him as a smaller version of Alec Anderson, essentially a 6th offensive lineman. By the way, side note, I'm interested to see if Hawes plays a lot. Does this mean Anderson plays less, which would be wild because Anderson was really good last year, and the Bills using 6 offensive linemen was a really good formation for them. But I want to stay with Jackson Hawes. The other part of this is, as a rookie, trying to get into the brain of a guy, getting into the psyche of someone making his debut. How hard is it when you are a guy who everybody knows is a blocking first tight end? You better be really good at that. You can't show up and be an average blocker. You can't just be okay. Even though you're a rookie and you're probably going to make mistakes, and there should be some level of understanding that it's going to take a little while for everybody to get better. You have one job if you're Jackson Hawes. You got to be able to make that block in that run game. If anything you get in the receiving game is gravy, you better be able to make that block. And to me, that's a very unique brand of pressure. We talked about TJ Sanders and Deion Walker, what they're going to face week 1. Well, they're facing Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. If it doesn't go well for them, well, they'll just have their names stacked up next to all the other hundreds of guys who've had a problem against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. With Jackson Hawes, it's going to be less obvious if he succeeds, more obvious if he fails. And that's the one job he's got to do. Now, I do think, again, I am very optimistic about what Jackson Hawes can bring to this run game and how much of a threat he can be as a blocker. To the point where, even though the Bills were really good with Alec Anderson in 6 offensive line personnel last year, I wouldn't be surprised if they go away from it because when Alec Anderson's on the field, you're pretty darn sure he's not going to catch a pass. Jackson Hawes, I don't know if he's a really good receiver, but he's going to at least wear an 80 number, so defenses have to take him seriously to a degree, a much higher degree than Alec Anderson as a receiver. Obviously, the bar for taking Alec Anderson seriously as a receiver is ridiculously low to the point where it's hard to even trip over. But Hawes will be a different opportunity for the Bills, a different, tool in the tool bag, as you'll hear from offensive coordinators a lot. And I'm fascinated to see not only how good is he at his job, how well can he use his tool, but how often do the Bills employ it? I don't think we're going to be getting to 11:30 Sunday night and thinking, wow, Jackson Hawes totally changed that game. I don't think that's going to happen. But the football nerd in me is going to really enjoy seeing how much the Bills get out of that rookie draft pick, because it's something the Bills have not had. Like I said, Dalton Kincaid is a not good blocker. Dawson Knox is fine, but not exceptional. So this is a new thing that this Bills offense with Josh Allen has had, a tight end that you can depend on to be able to win his blocking rep. How the Bills use it, I'm going to be totally fascinated by that. And maybe that's just the football nerd in me talking. All right, let's take a break. When we come back here, I want to get into the finale of Hard Knocks. Right? Was it good? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Very interested in the choices that were made by NFL Films and the Bills when it came to this project. We'll talk about that when the Endgame returns right after this. You're watching Rochester First. The kids, they all of them, call it Rock One. All right, I got tired of playing games with the lights behind me, so I just went straight white for this last segment here. Most of the time, I do enjoy the background light game, but today it just did not. Some days you're gonna have a win, some days you're gonna have a loss. Today was a big L for the background light game. We'll do better on Monday, trust me. All right, Hard Knocks is done. Bills had their experience. Talked to a few guys yesterday about what it was like to go through it on the inside. For the most part, they felt it was professionally handled. I think they said the comment that surprised me the most was the players said they really didn't notice the Hard Knocks people. Like, Hard Knocks had an army of blue shirts. Everybody wore these blue T-shirts that said Hard Knocks with the Bills. You could not miss them. For the Bills to say they did not notice it, I thought was a fascinating comment. I didn't talk to everybody on the team, but it was a receiver, a couple defensive linemen, and Sean McDermott. So that was fascinating to me. Professional was a word I heard a lot. Not surprising at all. Look, this is NFL Films. They know what they're doing. They're going to handle things the right way. And obviously they're going to, make sure that the teams are protected and taken care of. That being said, though, I don't know how effective the whole thing was with the Bills. Now, look, I enjoyed it. That last episode, the emotion Josh Allen showed with how much he clearly cares for his wife's career, how much it matters to him, was really interesting to see. But Josh Allen, as you might imagine, was, I think, the number one star of this show. Jimmy Charlo was close, but no, Josh Allen won. But the knock on it to me is the best moments of Hard Knocks, at least the best Josh Allen moments, were other people's interviews. He was on Bussin' with the Boys, and then he was on with Kyle Brandt for this emotional, thing that really stuck out in the last episode. So, it's not like that Hard Knocks was getting original material that really brought you in with Josh Allen. They were just there filming somebody else doing their job for him. The Bills didn't show anything with cuts. It certainly seemed like a policy that they did not want to, be in the room when those conversations were had. And certainly on a human level, I understand that. But this is something that we've come to expect from Hard Knocks, right? Josh Allen said on the Ryan Fitzpatrick podcast recently that they requested no cameras in the quarterback room. And he appreciated the fact that, NFL Films and Hard Knocks respected that. Well, if there's a camera anywhere that I wanted, it was in that quarterback room. We've heard all about how much Josh Allen and Mitch Trubisky get along, how good the room is. I'd like to see a little of that behind the scenes. This Hard Knocks did not at any point, talk about probably the two biggest players when it came to this preseason for the Bills. Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid. Not a single discussion about their preseason, what's going on with them. Now, look, it's easier when you're doing a show like this to bring in the non-football viewer with, is this person going to make the team or not? Because you will get the end of that story within the documentary you're covering. The Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid story, as we talked about a month ago, the preseason part of it almost doesn't even matter. Their journey, their legacy, their story for this season is going to be written starting Sunday. But regardless, to take two guys who are, polarizing figures and to not touch on them at all, I thought was a little unusual. And I don't know how much of this I even want to put on NFL Films or the Hard Knocks crew. I thought for what they were allowed to show, they did a great job. I mean, the TV nerd in me loves all the camera stuff, all the editing. The open was magic. I mean, I watched that thing at least 7 or 8 times. It was as good as it gets when you come to opening a show and putting together different, shots and music and slow motion and everything. Great open. The camera work, it was elite. The transitions were awesome. The cold tub bath as a transition during, I think, the second or third episode. That stuff is magic. But, for me being a TV guy, a photography guy, that's something that I dial into, and it's probably a small segment of your viewing public that can really appreciate that stuff. So it makes me think, if you're going to get an opportunity with a team like the Bills, and you can't have a camera where the cuts are being made, you can't have a camera in the room of the number one mega star, where it feels like you were, limited in some of the storylines that could be told. The Trey White injury was not mentioned once. Not once. And this is a guy that was featured early in the program with, running up and down the hills. But when he got hurt, the viewers at home who don't follow the Bills would not have known. So the thing that, that I land on with this is this show still worth doing now? If you're going to go to a team like Buffalo, who clearly did not want to be a part of it, Josh Allen, on that same podcast I talked about with Ryan Fitzpatrick, now Fitz wasn't on, he was talking with the other host, I don't remember his name. Regardless, Josh Allen admitted that he was not excited to be a part of Hard Knocks, and one would think not having the quarterback room allowed, or not a camera not being allowed in the quarterback room, was a result of Josh Allen and the Bills in general not being excited. If you're going to have a team like this that's so clearly being able to push back in this spot and that spot and this spot and that spot, what's going to be the purpose of Hard Knocks? I mean, yeah, it was fun. I still enjoyed it. But I can, again, nerd out in the camera work. I can get excited about the editing and the use of music. And there were other things that were good too. I like seeing KJ Hamler have fun. I like seeing Ty Johnson, doing the line dancing in the last episode. That stuff is fun. But it's kind of like, I like to eat whipped cream because it tastes good, but it doesn't really nourish me at all. When you have a documentary like this, I want to also get something nourishing out of it. And while there were good player stories, there were interesting, background stories about, who these guys are, what they do in their spare time. To a little bit of a degree, you did get to see Jamarcus Ingram and much more so Charlo in terms of their battle to make the roster. But outside of that, it was fun. It was funny. But was there a lot of, informational stuff that you got from the Bills to where you really felt like you learned things? And there was more than what I'm mentioning. And the other part of this, too, is that I don't watch a lot of Hard Knocks, so I don't have the other episodes to compare it to. And I know people on social media who talked to me about it said that this one was boring relative to the other ones. And that I could see how that happens, because it certainly felt like the Bills limited a number of things that went on there. And I think the Bills have every right to do that. But if the Bills are going to have their arm twisted to be on this show because the NFL thinks it's a good idea, and then limit in a large part the amount of things that Hard Knocks can show, then why am I excited about it? Why am I watching it? That said, like I said, I enjoyed it. I had a good time, but I'm not watching next year, because I don't think I'm going to get much out of it. All right, we're done today. We'll talk to you on Monday after the Bills take on the Ravens. Thanks for watching the Endgame. Remember, BKL Nightly on Rochester First later tonight. More Bill stuff then. We'll see you on Monday. Later.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 on demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.